It's great to be here. I want to thank the organizers of this great event. It's an expression of our growth and maturity and development as a political organization, and we're all very proud of it. And to see the goals that we set 8 years ago coming true, and it's all thanks to you and all of you. I do want to say that I did come here by myself, but it was not just me getting out of bed one morning and saying, I'm hungry for green chilies. I want to move to New Mexico and start a branch. This was done through consultation. Gloria and I and Richard Becker had talked at length before we made this decision of how important it was, based on the history of struggle, the history of all the oppressed nationalities, indigenous people and others, the connection to Mexico. We had to have a branch, and we had to have a center in the Southwest. And we were committed to that, and the moment came when we found the possibility to rent an office, cheap, and we discussed it with Brian and other leaders in the party and made a decision and I volunteered to come. So I wasn't coming by myself. I was coming with the entire party behind me. Not only the material things that were needed, but the orientation, the strategic part of planning to build the party into a national socialist fighting, cadre-driven party of working and oppressed people. So that's why we're here, all of us, and that's why we're going to continue to move on with success. I wanted to just open my talk with actually what I'm going to end with, and that is the importance of theory and study in the development of the movement. We are, those of you who are in the party know this, those of you who are coming around will hear more and more. We look at things in a materialist way. We look at things in the development of the means of production, of the relationship of the workers to those means of productions, and the role of the history of fighting the class enemy, the haves, on behalf of the have-nots. We don't see the world as just bad people or good people, that it's all just human nature, people are inherently guilty. We reject selfish, or we reject all of that. And that's why we study, and we study Marx and Lenin, and we develop our own literature and books and our own media and our own tools to become ready for those moments that come along when you have to move into combat mode. All the periods that come up to that, we use to train ourselves to study so we can move ahead quickly, as Brian said, as a centralized Leninist party, and lead and strategize and carry out the struggles that are necessary for the time. So, study, theory, we read, we discuss, we learn, but that becomes itself a materialist force. And Marx said it himself, that when the workers embraced revolutionary theory, the theory becomes a material force for revolutionary change. And that's what we're here this weekend to discuss and what we're talking about today. So I just wanted to start out with that because we are talking about all the different aspects of what is going on today. It's incredibly mind-blowing if you look at, all the issues that we have to look at carefully and mobilize for and be prepared to hit the streets and contact the workers about, whether it's Korea, the DPRK, Iran, Russia, China, the threats of danger in Latin America, and so many other issues that come from living in the belly of the beast of an imperialist country that has no regard for humanity, has no regard for justice, has only its own greed and selfishness, is capable and willing to do anything to achieve that goal, a goal they think will go on forever, an empire that will last forever. We beg to differ because it is going to change, and we're going to fight together to change it. So Trump issues an insane tweet. He does it all the time, but I think we were all kind of like pushed back, shocked about how he was going to annihilate all of North Korea, and in all sorts of language that was terrifying to anybody. And then 2 weeks later, asked for talks with the DPRK leadership. thanks to the masterful handling, I think, of the DPRK leadership and the South Koreans, the situation actually ended up taking some pressure off of the DPRK and de-escalated, for now, the prospect of an imminent war. So there's other issues that we've mentioned today, and I'm not going to go into great depth of any of them, but the question of U.S. goal of regime change in Iran is, as we all know, back on the news. It's being very much alive, and there is support from a significant portion of the ruling policy establishment for an escalation in tactics against Iran. Here also, Trump tweeted a terrifying threat against the Iranian regime and the people of Iran, shocking the world, and then proposing talks. In this case, the Iranians fired back immediately, making it clear that they, having been under sanctions, the assassination of their scientists and other leaders, the sabotage and other forms of hostility, they know this, that when the U.S. leaders talk peace, they mean war, right? And that's something we need to know. When they talk peace, we better get our anti-war mobilization prepared and ready. And this is happening all the time. The concept of endless warfare, which came out of the period after the Second World War, where they just figured they could continue to reach and maintain total global domination, that the world was their oyster, that endless wars of aggression and campaigns of genocide against civilian populations, starving millions of children as they did in Iraq. We'll never forget that. For example, when the U.S. they said to themselves, we can have endless war by means other than just invading countries. Of course, they did invade Iraq. But they figure you can have a few gunners in airplanes dropping bombs. You can starve people, starve the children of a country. You can demonize the leaders of a country. You can build up public opinion as long as there's not soldiers going over and dying or massive, public, the media exposing, as they did during the war in Vietnam, what was going on. That the population here would remain kind of quiet and not engage in protests and escalation of anti-war activity. So that's kind of the way they see it, and the way they'll do it, dropping bombs like they did on Libya and so forth. But it's all based on the fact that they intend, think, and clearly are confident that they can push ahead. That's why Bolton and Pompeo and Trump are standing up now that they have center stage and talking about the necessity of overthrowing the Iranian regime. They don't, as I said earlier, they are bad people. We hate them, okay? But they grow out of a system that is what we're fighting against, imperialism. It's rooted in the relationship of the workers to the means of production, to their bosses, to the bosses stealing money out of surplus value, going into the workers' pockets every 2 weeks and taking our money out so they can pay for these wars and make lots more money. So one of the things that we do here is try to drill down on these issues about the relationship of imperialism as a system, not as a policy, to what's going on. You will find many currents in the left who feel that, and it might, currently there's an upsurge going in numbers of recruits in other groups, but there's the thing that things can be reformed within the context of the system as it is, the Democrats. We can change it if we have enough progressive people in there. We don't agree with that. We think it's a systemic problem. The genocide and the suffering that they cause come out of a system called imperialism, and we look at and study it through the application of Marxism and also Leninism in order to build the kind of party that's needed to make effective change. As Gloria said, through reforms, Yeah, you get it. You fight for 2 decades, but you're always vulnerable to having it taken away, and you can see that now with women's rights and other issues as well. So that's why socialism is necessary to move forward to build a system where there is equality, where there is real peace with justice and real ability for humanity to unleash all the things that could be used for good stuff, but now it's being used for warfare and destruction. The other thing is that I wanted to mention, first of all, I don't know if you're coming around, you haven't read any of our books yet, but Imperialism in the 21st Century is one of my favorite books. It really so clearly explains the driving forces behind the imperialist system. So if you haven't read it, do read it. It shows how, with the development of the class system, from the overthrow of the matriarchy, patriarchal society, the rise of class society, the rise of warfare, the rise of slavery, of genocide and greed and suffering to what we see now in Los Angeles. You cannot walk through the streets without having to step over bodies of workers, our co-workers who have lost their homes because they can't afford their rents anymore, and they have to live in their cars as long as they can. They lose their car and they end up in the street. That is what we're dealing with, and that's what we have to overturn and change and fight for revolutionary transformation of society, so no one has to sleep on the streets. So on Iran, the situation, the U.S. is beating its war drums again. Democrats and Republicans, Brian described it so well, the baiting, the Russiagate, and the role of all that in what we're doing, how those who are trying to push for progress and change are being, in a Cold War way, trying to push them back and repressed. So the nuclear agreement with Iran, which Trump violated, he didn't overturn it, he violated it because it wasn't, you can't really overturn an agreement such as that. It allowed these forces to come to the center, and those who opposed it and those who opposed the nuclear deal kind of took center stage. Under Obama, support for the deal took place when the U.S. strategies in the U.S. directed war against Syria regime, when those faltered and Obama was forced to take bombing of Syria off the table. That's when it kind of like got going, I believe. After Iraq, after Libya, after Syria, Iran remains the center of resistance to U.S. imperialist domination in the Middle East. It is a large country with a huge working class that has experienced U.S. hostilities ever since the ouster of the Shah. It has the capacity to resist. And we know that, as I said, this is something that Trump, Pompeo, Bolton, all the others, they don't care about that. They're going to do what they want because they believe that they're going to last forever. The very idea of a U.S. war against Iran is terrifying. There's no way a U.S. war against Iran could remain a regional war going on just in Iran. It will exacerbate the global struggles now going on between the U.S. and its killing machine, and could easily escalate involving European junior partners of the U.S. where relations are strained. For example, both France and Germany urged Trump not to violate the Iran agreement. It could also draw in major players, as Brian and others have said, such as China and Russia, who are eating away at their traditional role of the U.S. as the world unilateral power. Our analysis and theory outlined by Lenin rings as true today as when it was written a century ago. It is based on Marxist theory and scientific method. Liberals and many honest but ill-informed people assert that, yes, imperialism is bad and evil, but it's a policy that can be changed into a kinder and more gentle form of rule. I don't think so. No. Read Lenin's pamphlet, read our book, and pass it on to others. I take the LA subway, and yes, LA does have a subway now. They had to do it, or no one would ever be able to get to work. I see a lot of people reading books now. And putting down their cell phones and opening up actual books and reading. And I think that's very encouraging. Of course, social media is a very powerful force as well. But however we have to do it, we have to spread the truth about what we are discussing this weekend. We have to bring it to the people in whatever way we can. We had a very successful street meeting in Los Angeles last weekend where new younger comrades got up and talked about this, and we drew a big crowd that stayed for almost 2 hours listening to every word. I haven't seen that since the 60s and the 70s, a moment when people want to hear loud, yeah, what is this socialism thing? And they really did sit and listen. It was a great, we're going to do it more. I suggest doing it in your cities too as well. Just go out and talk directly to the workers. You come from the working class, from an organization. You can't mess up. You'll tell the truth, and it will resonate with the workers who now are more willing and able to listen than they have been in a long time. So as I said, Marx says, when people embrace revolutionary theory, the theory becomes a material force for revolutionary change and the advent of a new socialist system and the smashing of imperialism and capitalism and exploitation once and for all. Power to the people.